Hear a story from the inside. Thursday, 10 o'clock, BBC One.
More real-life stories of emergency and courageous rescue now on BBC One with Michael Burke, 999.
All of tonight's rescues are true stories. We've sometimes used actors or stuntmen, but everything you see and hear is based on the accounts of the people involved. They've helped us to reconstruct events as they happened. Tonight on 999, the day-old baby thrown from her smashed incubator and the ambulance man haunted by memories of the crash. Practical tips on how you can stay safe on the beach and in the water this summer. And the fall that broke most of the bones in his body and put all their lives at risk, balanced over a 1,000-foot drop. When newborn babies are sick or premature, they usually spend time in an incubator, where hospital staff can monitor them in a controlled environment. If a baby has to be transported any distance, then they're usually taken in a mobile incubator, which, because of all the equipment and the trolley and so on, can weigh up to 35 stone. It can be linked into the systems in an ambulance to provide the baby with a life support system. Victoria Elliott was only a day old when she had to be transferred from the hospital at Whitehaven, where she was born, to Newcastle for specialist treatment, a journey of around 100 miles that the ambulance crew had made many times before. But what happened that day had a profound and lasting effect on them.
On returning back to the arms to try and find Victoria, I was expecting, because of the devastation, is actually to find Victoria dead.
I lay down in the meantime and I heard Shona say, "Lorraine, she's dead, she's dead."
If anything had happened to Victoria on the way down to Princess Mary, we didn't want it to sort of pass away on her own. We wanted to be with her, you know.
Right after it. Yep, that's it.
Victoria had a condition called persistent fetal circulation, which is a respiratory and circulatory problem which necessitates us breathing and providing other support for her. She was a full-term baby, and to prevent her fighting against the ventilator which was doing the breathing for her, we sedated and paralysed her with a muscle relaxant.
Over this way a bit.
Paramedic Steve Thompson, along with nurse Lorraine Munro and Dr. Shona Mitchell, played here by actors, were to travel with Victoria. Her grandmother Christine Elliott and her mother Diana were also hoping to go with her.
We thought, oh well, one of us is sure to go with her. But when the ambulance pulled up, we asked, the doctor says, oh no, there was no room in the ambulance at all. So we couldn't have went with her.
I loaded the baby on. I was told it wasn't serious as they first thought, but could I take care because we were having problems with the airway. I just said, yes, no problem, I'll drive back slowly on the same route that I've taken many, many times, with nothing untoward happening previously.
The medical team monitored Victoria's condition throughout the journey. The incubator was the only thing keeping her alive and supplied with oxygen.
The transfer back really up until Hexham was quite uneventful. She was quite stable, but she was obviously poorly. And we got to Hexham and the incubator started alarming.
The oxygen alarm meant they had seconds to sort the situation out.
We seem to have some problems with the internal supplies and the electrical system.
There must be a problem with the power supply. I'll disconnect it.
So what I done was I stood up and
disconnected from the main supply from the vehicle to run back onto the internal supply of the incubator. At the time of disconnecting, it was a sudden bang. My main concern at the time was my family. Quite clearly remember shouting for my family, thinking I'll never ever see them again. That was my main concern. And at that point I thought I was dead. Never ever forget the noises or the screams. And as the days progressed into weeks, I was getting flashbacks through the daylight hours as well as night times, which then led on to fear and panic.
Everything became dark and little bright lights were flashing, and I was completely, it was like a dream, and I thought, I'm dying. And my first thought was, how's my mum going to cope with this? And I can't do this to her. And then I looked around and saw the complete chaos, and there's the ambulance, and I saw Shona, and screamed at each other, we're alive, we're alive. And then Victoria, where's Victoria? And I said, how are we going to tell the parents? What are we going to tell her mum?
After it came to rest, it was very, very quiet. No sounds whatsoever. And all of a sudden it was basically panic. Organised panic.
Where's the baby? Where's the baby? Where's the baby?
Stop! 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 Hey, have you got a phone? Have you got a phone? No, I haven't, no. There's an ambulance parked about 2 miles back on the roundabout. Get them, tell them what's happened, tell them to radio for at least 2 more ambulances, because there'll be 5 casualties. 5 casualties. There's nothing I can do here. Do it now, do it quickly.
And it was a case of hunting through the debris to try and find the baby, which seemed to be ages. I was expecting, because the devastation is actually to find Victoria dead.
Where is she? It's okay, we'll find her. Just keep still.
Other motorists stopped and tried to help, but Victoria's incubator had been thrown out of the ambulance and smashed. In the confusion, her body was found under some wreckage and handed to the doctor.
And I must confess, I didn't think that she would be alive. She needed a lot of oxygen. We were breathing for her. She'd been sedated and paralysed, so she had no ability to make any respiratory effort for herself. She had no cardiac output and no respirations. So I started cardiac massage.
Come on, little girl.
She still had the inner bit of her endotracheal tube attached.
Come on.
So I was able to breathe down that. She quickly re-established cardiac output, but obviously made no respiratory effort, so we just kept mouth-to-tube resuscitation, really.
Come on, little girl. You give me... Just give me a breath. Come on, little girl. Come on.
It was incredible. I mean, she had fairly trivial injuries, really. It was incredible.
Steve had broken his ankle. In all, 10 people needed hospital treatment.
Got a baby arrested with the doctor now. Got a nurse there with whiplash. 2 crew members over there slightly injured. The baby's a priority.
The ambulance had collided with another vehicle. Victoria escaped almost unharmed and has since made a full recovery from her illness. But Steve and his colleagues haven't been so lucky.
Eventually, it got to stages where I was actually crying. I was suffering chest pains. Things like this were developing and manifesting without me really realising I was bad and ill. And I was diagnosed as severe clinical depression as a result of the accident, which then led on to post-traumatic shock disorder. A long-term effect to me was actually having to resign from accident and emergency work. It was a case of receiving counselling, receiving medication, and actually progressing yourself towards returning back to the normal world.
Nice and easy. 1, 2, 3.
Yes, all the emergency services will suffer from it. There will be individuals who went through more traumatic cases than I've actually went through, who may be suffering from the same sort of signs and symptoms I actually had. Sleepless nights, losing weight, social life vanishing, being aggressive towards friends, but assure you that it does get better over time.
Diana organised a party with the ambulance crew to celebrate her daughter's first birthday. Victoria was blissfully unaware of the significance of the anniversary for her guests. Steve knew only too well.
Victoria at the moment is my third adopted daughter. Actually love a little girl. We're in regular contact. Last year I was celebrating our first birthday, and it was a fantastic day. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's really nice to see the little girl now and again. She's the most luckiest girl in the world. And I hope to see her again for our next birthday. And God bless the little girl and her family.
Everybody in the emergency services is in the front line, but as we've seen, they're human too. It hasn't always been easy for them to talk about such extreme emotions. But Steve was brave enough to share his experiences of just how crippling post-traumatic stress disorder can be. It's only relatively recently that it's been recognised as a problem. And as the psychiatrist Dr. Gordon Turnbull explained to me, anybody can get it, and the three main symptoms, all of which were experienced by Steve, are unmistakable.
People remember what happened to them by day in the form of flashbacks and by night in the form of nightmares. And these are not just ordinary memories. These are vivid, precise, exact recollections of exactly what happened. Not only the facts, but the feelings, so they're pretty nasty. The second thing is that they try to avoid those memories as best as they can. So, for instance, there'll be a lot of people avoiding this particular program. The third thing is that they suffer from an unusually high state of arousal, both in the head and in the body. So it's a total body reaction. One person put it very well, and that was that despite being Sunday and washing the car and reading the Sunday newspapers was the only major challenge that they had, they felt all day that they were about to make their first parachute jump.
Is it easy for people in the emergency services particularly to acknowledge that they're under this kind of stress, or is there a stigma in those organisations? Do they see it as an expression of weakness, perhaps?
That used to be the case much more than now, thank goodness. I think that there was a tremendous stigma about anything that reeked of psychology. But now I think that things are different. But you see, it's particularly because the therapists involved in this area are beginning to demonstrate that post-traumatic stress disorder is eminently fixable.
How common is it then in the emergency services? I mean, these people by definition have to deal with traumatic incidents maybe every day.
Yes, that's right, and I think it's very common because they are normal people and they experience normal reactions. They may, however, be quite good at processing their experiences, that is, at debriefing themselves. I mean, down in the pub is actually quite a good way to do it. It's traditionally been done that way, and that's not a bad way. But of course it can be the other way. One major experience will then actually bring out the whole lot all at once, and then they have a major post-traumatic stress reaction.
You're under this stress, you go along and get it fixed. Does that mean you're going to be as good a police, fire, ambulance worker as you were before?
It's better than that, actually. I think the aim for most therapy in PTSD now is to improve upon the old version. That is, that people have learned things about themselves because they've been exposed and because they have survived that will actually augment them as people, that actually helps them to grow as people.
Fishing's far and away the most popular sport in Britain, at any rate as far as the number of people taking part are concerned. 4 million or so, they reckon. While it may be a bit more pleasant and comfortable when the sun's shining, there are those mad fishermen who think the fishing is actually better when it's raining. Apparently the salmon and the trout are much more active when the water is rising, when it's moving. It was certainly moving on the day that Ian Scar Hall took his wife Ruth to the Scottish Highlands on her first ever fishing trip. In our reconstruction of what happened, Ian and Ruth are both played by actors. It was early September when Ian and Ruth Scar Hall set out for a day's fishing on the River Castley in Sutherland.
Normally it's quite a slow-moving river, but the river fills up very quickly and within a matter of an hour, hour and a half, can rise to about 10, 12 to 15 feet in depth and spread across from about 15 to 20 metres wide to about 100 metres wide.
If you get a big flood, it'll be half to 3/4 of a mile wide, and it's very fast in places. I don't know how many knots it would be, but you would be, I doubt if you could swim across it, put it that way.
Ian was an enthusiastic salmon fisherman and wanted to share his enjoyment with his wife, who's Swiss.
I like the warmth. I like swimming. I actually do like water, and I like the sunshine. So we have a compromise. I come fishing with him, and he comes and suffers with me in Florida once a year.
Ian knew where to take Ruth to give her a chance of catching her first salmon. They started by crossing the river by boat.
The previous day, I'd actually caught 3 fish, and Ruth hadn't caught one at all. So it was getting increasingly important that she should catch a fish, otherwise she was going to lose interest.
There was rain in the air, but the weather was generally dry, though overcast. Once they dealt with the boat, they had to wade across a mountain stream which flowed into the River Castley. The water was less than 12 inches deep.
I knew this particular spot that I thought there was a very good chance we could get a fish. We did contact a nice salmon, which took probably 15-20 minutes to play and land, and Ruth very skillfully played the fish, landed it, and we were very jubilant and very happy for a while. Having caught the one fish, the attraction now was to go on and get a second fish. So we carried out to fish the pool out. And of course that, with the benefit of hindsight, proved to be a mistake.
It began to rain. They carried on fishing. The wilder the weather, the better the chance of hooking a salmon. But the weather got worse. The water level of the river and stream was rising fast. Ian didn't notice at first. Ruth was getting increasingly anxious, though, as darkness fell.
Ian, don't you think it's time you went home?
All right, darling, just a little bit longer.
Eventually, I persuaded Ian to go back. Well, I just couldn't understand. There was suddenly this burn with water so high, and I said to him, I'm sure we didn't come this way. And he said, yes, we did. When we crossed it, it only came up to my ankle. And when we went back, it was just all white. It was just gushing. It was just awful.
We went step by step across the river. I really thought we would get across. And we got to halfway, and the main stream was coming down. It was boiling up around us. It was impossible to cross the burn, which was no longer a burn. It was a raging torrent.
Cold and wet, they were now trapped on the wrong side of the river with nothing to eat or drink. At 10 o'clock, farmer John White was out trying to move his sheep to the safety of higher ground. 12 of them were to drown that night.
Someone with a torch! Help! Help! Where are you? Over here! This way! We're stranded!
I don't know if they'd been shouting for a long time, because, you know, you could have shouted for the rest of your life and you wouldn't have got anybody. It was just a pure chance that we happened to be there at that time.
Can you get help? I'll go and phone the police and then I'll come back. Thank you, but please, hurry! Please, hurry, we're frozen!
Dartmouth Police Station. We had wind, force 11, 12, and hail, snow, and rain that was just horizontal.
Hello there, this is the police.
Ian and Ruth had now been stranded for 5 hours.
From the map we could tell that they were cut off from both the west and the east side by burns that were feeding the main River Castley, and the only option was either by boat or by air.
At midnight, a helicopter was scrambled from RAF Lossiemouth.
The conditions were so bad that the Rescue Coordination Centre left it entirely up to me as to whether we made any attempt at all to leave Lossiemouth. But I'm a salmon fisherman, so I had some sympathy with the guys in trouble. And we did make an attempt. We, in fact, made 3 attempts, but the rain was so heavy, it was just like a monsoon.
The visibility at times was almost zero, and then it would clear a bit. And it was quite a while before we actually saw the helicopter coming towards us.
In my final attempt, I hover taxied up the river at 50 feet, but But sadly, the wind was also very strong, 70 miles an hour, and that's beyond the aircraft's capabilities.
I'm sure he did his very best to get into us. But just at that time, a particularly bad squall seemed to come down. It completely obliterated the helicopter from sight, and it droned away again.
They realized a second rescue attempt would have to wait until first light. The police stayed on the far bank, but couldn't help them now.
So we settled down really for the night, and Ruth was very, very good. She was very calm about it. She would talk of other things other than the predicament that we were in.
The fingers were hurting, the toes were hurting. I just went numb then a bit, and I think at times you sort of do not sleep, but you go quiet. Also, I think what is the instinct? You have to survive. It's the only way. You just have to survive, and somewhere the strength comes.
4 times during the night they moved to higher ground. Their boat was washed away. Hurricane winds gusted to more than 100 miles an hour.
Well, the next step was to get a boat across to them, and the only way we could do that was to obtain the services of the Sutherland Rescue Association, which is the inshore rescue association based in Dornoch.
We tend to be used to launching our boat in the sea, and coming 30 miles inland to a river is not really how we're seen at all, and especially not if it's doing 25 knots. So we had to be sure that when we got it in the river, we were in complete control of the situation from the first second.
Hello! We'll get a boat across to you shortly! Hold on!
We had it worked out, essentially, that we were going to go down the river. We had the motor going all the time, so we'd have some steerage, and I think they paid us out on the rope. And we go down past the Scar Halls, and then steamed back up to them on the other side.
It seemed ages how they had to get the boat into the water with all these winches, and it just took ages.
Because of the speed of the river, and the rope that we were tethered to on the other bank was in a big bow, and that was tending to pull us downstream. And at one time we thought we were going to have to cut the rope, because the river was pulling the rope right down past the boat. And if it had cut the prop, that would have been it finished, you know.
Ian and Ruth were soaked to the skin and extremely cold.
One of the men very quickly, obviously saw what the state I was in, tried very quickly to get me out. And of course this man fell into the river. And I just collapsed. All hope went. I thought, no, there's no way out at all.
Ruth was suffering from hypothermia, but neither she nor Ian had any long-term effects from their stark lesson in how quickly conditions can change.
I feel awful to put so many people into danger with us, which of course we didn't want it to, but I think people should take notice of that, because they're very, very brave people. I still go fishing, because I do have at times fun, but I will never ever cross that river in this little dinghy again.
Imagine spending an 8-hour shift peering through binoculars trying to spot individuals in distress amongst a sea of between 3,000 and 10,000 people. That's how busy it gets here at the beach at Perranporth at the height of the season, and many of those visitors are totally unaware of the dangers. A typical day's crop of casualties keeps the Surf Patrol busy, but as we'll see, they spend a lot of their time trying to stop trouble before it happens.
quite a few people this summer have been standing on weaver fishes. This is a weaver fish in the jar here. Danny will be able to tell you a few things about the weaver fish.
You'll find them, they bury themselves in the sand, normally at low tide. Their dorsal fin has got 3 spines, and they're hollow spines.
You sit down there. Okay.
The poison from a weaver fish is in fact a protein, and rather like egg whites is changed by heat, the sting of the weaver fish, the poison of the weaver fish is changed by heat. So the way we treat the weaver fish sting is to place the foot that's been stung into as hot water as you can stand.
All right. Maybe you feel better than the hot water now? Or put it down into the water a bit further. The tears have gone now, haven't they? Yeah? Good.
I've lost my brother. Can I run back and see if he's there?
Yeah, try it there, but then come back down here if he's not there.
I looked for him for a while. He was walking up the beach casually, so he wasn't in the sea.
Happens all the time. What happens is they go in the water and then they come out, and because they come out and the sun's going down on, you can't make out who's who. Yeah. They just go off and make sandcastles, but it's a good message for young boys, especially young boys and young girls of about 9, 10, 11. If they're going anywhere on the beach, let their parents know where they're going.
Don't do it again, Nicholas, all right? I think it's more difficult if you're a woman telling people to do things, because they don't. I think the archetypal sort of lifeguard is, you know, a big bronze man, and they don't tend to take it so well. The thing is, the tide's coming in really quickly here, and it comes in a lot quicker than people anticipate, and they get cut off. Can you please move back round the beach? Because the tide is coming in very quickly, and it's very dangerous. Thank you.
No, it was fairly obvious. Watching the tide coming in, we were literally just having a wander around. And apart from that, there's an escape route straight up over the top there. Right?
But the thing is, you never know whether people are local or they're on holiday, so you have to go and tell them anyway, just in case. Sometimes they get a bit offended when you do try and tell them, but, you know, that's what we're here for, really.
No sun cream on, sir? No, not yet today. It was such a surprise for the sun to come out this afternoon that we just come straight down here, to be honest.
Look, what we're doing is we're dishing out some leaflets, and it advises you of the problems that can occur, not now, but in 10 or 15 years' time if you don't cover up. 34,000 people a year in this country actually contract skin cancer. So it's something that's the public are becoming more aware of.
You show me sunburn, Dad. This is what happens if you don't read these documents.
People who are inexperienced can just get a wetsuit and a board which can float them and just jump in the sea and be gone. I mean, you wouldn't be able to just go in and hire a hang glider and jump off a cliff, would you? When I was in Aussie working, the only people that hired out boards, or if somebody wanted to set up a business as hiring surfboards, they had to be qualified in as much as they had to have their bronze medallion, and they were restricted on the number of boards that they could hire out, and they were responsible for those people.
Okay. Have you got a car here?
Yes, I've got a car.
Do you know where the casualty is, over in Truro or not?
I don't know.
Well, he needs to go in for a couple of stitches there. Okay, because he's obviously got a few cuts down the side of his face.
Just the first day, he's had the board nearly.
Is it?
Well, it's still got half an hour.
Yeah. All right, well, we might need the end repaired.
Attention in the water, please. Attention in the water. Unfortunately, due to dangerous conditions, the beach is now closed.
Somebody really crashed into my head with a board, so I was just about to come out before they closed it. So it's a good decision, really.
I mean, we could have been in trouble out there really easy today. They were out straight away to make sure we got back in all right.
Get back to shore, you move right across. Right into the shore, though. Keep going. you wouldn't want a holidaymaker going out in it, because if they got in it, they'd panic and they would quite easily go under today with that sort of surf as well.
We do our best to keep some sort of swimming area open. Very, very rarely the red flag goes up here now. It isn't very often.
I don't mind. If it's better in terms of safety, especially because I've got young kids, I'd rather they tell us and get us out than keep us in.
If we do stay out there, then, well, it'd be stupid, wouldn't it?
Next week, the world's finest lifesavers descend on Cornwall for Rescue 94, with Perranporth up against thousands of competitors from 32 different countries.
The Perranporth Surf Patrollers get busy every year because too few of us know about beach safety and about how treacherous the sea can be. Britain has more than 9,000 miles of coastline, and there just aren't enough lifeguards to watch over everyone. So if you're planning a trip to the seaside, the Royal Life-Saving Society offers these practical tips on making your time on the beach as safe and enjoyable as possible.
When you're by the sea, watch your children at all times. Every year in Britain, 50 children under the age of 10 drown while playing on beaches and waterways. Remember, children can drown even in very shallow water. Always obey any warning flags and notices and try to swim where there are lifeguards on duty. You can tell a beach is patrolled if there are red and yellow flags flying. It's safe to swim between these flags, but don't use inflatable airbeds in the water, as you can easily get swept out to sea. And remember, never swim when the red flag is flying. Know your limits and never overestimate your swimming ability. Stay within your depth and swim parallel to the shore, not out to sea. Never swim alone, and always tell someone where you're going and what time you expect to get back. Don't swim if you feel unwell, when you're cold and tired, or after drinking alcohol. And wait for at least an hour after a meal, otherwise you may get cramp, which will make swimming difficult. If you want to cool off, beware of the water's temperature. Plunging into cold water when you're really hot can sap your energy, and a cold shock can even cause a heart attack. Never dive into the unknown. Anything could be under the water, sharp bits of rubbish, rocks and weeds. And if you dive into water that's too shallow, you could seriously injure yourself or even end up paralyzed. Look out for rip tides. On Perranporth Beach there are particular danger. They're usually indicated by calmer water between areas of surf, and they can carry you out to sea. Black and white checkered flags are used to mark the areas reserved for surfers and windsurfers. It's recommended that all surfers should be able to swim at least 50 meters in open water for their own safety. If you do get into difficulty, try to stay calm. Raise your arm to attract attention. Save your energy by floating on your back and going with the water, or swim diagonally across the current. If you're on a belly board, stay with it. It gives you added buoyancy and makes you easier to spot. If you see someone in trouble, raise the alarm, tell the lifeguard, or dial 999 and ask for the Coast Guard. They're on call 24 hours a day to coordinate search and rescue operations. Only go into the water to help someone if you're a strong swimmer. Every year, around 10 people are drowned while attempting a rescue. So, if you're in any doubt, stay out of the water.
On the beach, as anywhere, a few basic first aid skills can be enough to save the life of somebody in trouble. And we're offering another 1,000 viewers the chance to acquire those skills free of charge. The next 999 Lifesaver Roadshow event is going to be held in the George Fox building at Lancaster University on the weekend of the 8th and 9th of July. If you want to go, then call us now on 0891 339922. That's 0891 339922. The call will cost you no more than 50 pence. There's a data burst coming up which includes information on beach safety. So start recording now while I give you the address you can write to for the 999 Lifesaver Guide. To get a copy, send a cheque for £2.50 made payable to BBC Education to 999 Lifesaver Guide, P.O. Box 7, London W3 6XJ. You can find that address on CFAX, page 621. This is a museum now, but mine head frames like this once studied the landscape here in Cornwall, the home of tin mining for 3,000 years. Now there's only one working mine left. At its peak in the 1870s, there were 350 mines and 35,000 miners. They worked in cold, wet and dangerous conditions. When accidents happened, it was fellow miners who came to the rescue. A typical shaft can be 3,000 feet deep, and it's usually divided into 3 vertical sections. The first 2 contain cages that take the miners up and down. The third, running alongside, is a service shaft that's used for hauling bulky equipment in and out of the mine. It was in just such a service shaft that 3 miners were due to carry out routine inspection. The only access was by a vertical ladder running down the shaft wall.
I'd gone to work in the morning and I'd felt a sort of premonition that something would happen that day. And in fact it did.
It upsets you tremendously. It's not a thing you want to happen to anybody. It's unbelievable. It was unbelievable that he was still alive.
Stop the cage.
For a man to come back and go down in that mine after what happened to he, is a very brave man.
We all face the same hazards. We all face the same problems on a day-to-day basis. And I think as a result of this, it builds up a camaraderie that you very rarely find in any other industry.
You've got water leaking, you've got the downdraft like inside a wind tunnel. Winter time, you've got icicles hanging down. The conditions in the shaft is the sort of job that you don't hang around. If you hang around, you're shaken with a cold.
It is very dangerous. But if you're brought up in that sort of environment, you don't realize the danger. It's something that you normally get used to. That's something that grows in you.
It was a freezing January morning when 3 men began their weekly inspection of the service shaft, where they knew some work was needed.
Right. This isn't looking too bad.
They were led by George Curtis, the underground manager, together with Bill Mutton, the shaft foreman, and Eddie Leake, the mine captain, all played here by actors.
What do you think, Eddie? Yeah, absolutely. I reckon the problem's up above here.
Yeah, I know. I thought that last week. Right, well, I'm going to go up to the next level on the ladder, take a closer look. I want you two to follow behind in the cage, okay?
Right.
George said, okay, I'll go on ahead of you now. And he probably went up 30 feet while we made our way to the top of the cage.
George is right. You get his fire up?
Yeah, I'm sure it's up there somewhere. All right, let's go up.
There was no reason to believe that there'd be any problems as they made their way up to the next level. But today, a job George had done hundreds of times before would go wrong.
What was that?
Oh, that's George going through.
You better get down there.
Having fallen down the shaft, you never expect to find the person living again. It's a horrible feeling, horrible feeling.
My reaction then was, oh my God, he's gone. And I thought, well, we've got a horrible task now.
Even not knowing whether he was alive or dead, the obvious feeling is how quick can I get to him? And the cage doesn't actually go fast enough to get to him.
It was pitch black. They'd only their helmet lamps to spot him.
There he is. On that beam.
Good girl. Stop the cage.
To my surprise, he was lying across the service shaft on a barren timber.
Oh, this is a bad way. He's right on the edge.
He was moaning. My reaction then was to get there quick because I could see that he would have rolled over and gone again, which was over 1,000 feet.
I better try and get around.
All right. Look, you go upstairs and see if you can get in. All right? Okay. Watch yourself, Bill.
All right.
Eddie knew that one false move and Bill would fall too.
I think not only myself, I think Billy Mutton as well, were more than relieved that we heard just a moan from him. At least we knew he was alive.
Just keep still, you're right on the edge, all right?
While there's life, there's hope, always. If you term it a lot of luck, yes, an amazing piece of luck. If he hadn't hit those planks, he could have gone right through to the bottom of the shaft.
my first reaction was to grab him.
All right, George. I got you, mate. All right.
Bill was balancing on a slippery beam 8 inches wide. There was a 1,000-foot drop below him.
By leaning over George, I was leaning over open shaft, and the only thing I could see was a guardrail. He's not there as a rail put there that would hold any weight. It's just nailed on, and I wasn't secure by holding on to that. And a lethal movement from George would took the two of us. So for the first 10 minutes that I spent with George, it was the worst 10 minutes of my life.
Eddie's gone up for help, all right? Keep very still.
Within minutes, Eddie was on the surface to get help from Terry Mankey, leader of the mine's rescue team, also played by an actor.
Terry, there's been a bad accident. George has fallen down the shaft. George?
George was a colleague and a friend. Obviously, I was very concerned for his overall safety, because I knew that at the end of the day, having fallen that far, that and it would take a miracle for him to be uninjured. And, at that stage, I wasn't believing in miracles.
What stopped him falling the other 1,000 feet? Just a couple of beams. Bill's holding him at the moment.
Okay. You call the rescue team, I'll get the crash box.
Right.
My biggest worry then was, if he fall off that timber, what am I going to tell him? I was more concerned with keeping me there at all costs, because how do you explain to men that you lost them?
In various mines throughout the country, there have been a number of fatalities in shafts. I have seen someone go from top to bottom, and it's not a very pleasant sight, obviously.
Meanwhile, Bill was surprised by how assertive George was being.
Your battery box. Battery box. Get it off. Don't worry about it. Get it off. All right, mate.
I thought, well, the cocky bugger, he fell nearly 150 feet, and he's still telling me, giving me bloody orders. I thought, why don't you pass out, George, and give me a chance to secure proper?
George?
Fortunately, George did pass out, which at last allowed Bill to make himself safe.
As soon as I got my safety belt fastened, and I could put some weight on that belt, I had 2 hands now that I could have kept them there.
God, am I glad to see you guys. Okay, Eddie, stay put. Bill, I'm coming over, all right?
When they did arrive and come across, my arms was dead. It was cold.
Okay, George. Let's put your head back.
The first thing was obviously to ensure the 3 major things. A, that he had a competent airway, a breathing function, a cardiac function.
Okay, George.
Then it was a top-to-toe survey to find the full extent of his injuries. He was given a jab to try and ease the intense pain that he was obviously suffering, bearing in mind the nature of his injuries. Because of the time factor, because of where we were, it was very difficult to get the relevant equipment to us. But we used, obviously, the better leg to splint the worst leg.
Put his arm across your chest.
And we used his own body as a splint and the appropriate bandages.
Got it? Tie this off. And Bill, I want you and Eddie to change places and organise the stretcher, Bill.
The next problem was how they were going to move George onto a stretcher in such a confined space. There was no room to manoeuvre. The shaft was 6 feet by 10. And with all of the rescuers still balanced on narrow ledges, one slip by any of them would be fatal.
Keep it coming. Yeah. Okay. Put round to Eddie.
Getting him on a stretcher was a major problem. The stretcher had to be initially handed across the gap to us. We had limited access to George. We had to lift him and get the stretcher under him. And the only room was literally where we were standing. We were virtually standing on where the stretcher had to be.
Are we ready? After 3. 1, 2, 3, lift!
So far, so good. But next came the most critical and dangerous part of the rescue. They'd have to manhandle George and the stretcher across the open shaft. They knew by now he had multiple injuries. Any movement at all could make them worse, but they had no choice.
1, 2, 3, lift. Gently. Up we go. Up we go.
Because of the situation we were in, we had to literally throw the rule book out of the window. We had to sling the stretcher across the shaft, inside the cage, because of the constraints of physical dimensions. The stretcher still had to be in the vertical situation until we eventually got to surface. So you know you're approaching the surface. The light changes, the atmosphere itself changes. So there's a feeling of relief that in the very near future you'll be handing on your casualty to professional ambulance service, who in turn will swiftly take him to hospital.
It had taken 2.5 hours to rescue George. He'd broken almost every bone in his body. His injuries were so severe, he spent 5.5 months in hospital. But 2 weeks after his release, he went back to work as a miner.
I suffered multiple fractures and dislocations to the body. The only limb that was unaffected was my right arm. I can remember climbing the ladder from 190 fathoms, and I remember something striking me at the back of the neck. The next thing I remember was that I was airborne. The thing that ran through my mind was that you've fallen, you've got to grab something. And just by the time I'd said that, I felt a bump and I came to rest.
Another 1,000 men could fall through that shaft over that distance, and they would never come out alive.
Every step that they took, they were putting themselves at risk. And now I happened to think about what they were doing to keep themselves safe, in addition to rescuing me. So they had a very tricky and difficult exercise. I've got to express my gratitude for them, the way that they performed.
The amazing part of the fall was that George landed on the timber that he ordered me to take out, which I left there because they was put there for a specific reason of the ground pressure on the side of the shaft. That was one of the miracles of my life. He was a miracle in the sense that George could fall in an open shaft and fall on a piece of timber which he wanted took out.
Next week, the holiday hell of a family from Leicester and the lockkeeper who risked his life to save them.
To see the fear on those people's faces, and they were all appealing to me to do something, was the most horrible thing I've ever seen, I think, in my life.
Sunday on BBC One, and at 7, How to Keep a Secret.